Sometimes it's not the loudest shout that shakes the world. It's the quiet sentence spoken in the right moment with the wrong intention. Recently, Donald Trump said something that should have every thinking person on this planet stop, rewind, and ask, did he really just say that? And if you've been paying attention to global events, you know exactly why this statement feels like a warning, a signal that the stage is being set for something far bigger, far darker, and far more dangerous than politics. This isn't about left or right. This is about the future of humanity, and the signs are becoming impossible to ignore. Sometimes we underestimate just how much weight a single sentence can carry. We think of speeches as these long, carefully constructed masterpieces, but history has shown us over and over again that it's often one phrase, one choice of words that can alter the course of nations. Think about it. Wars have started because of a statement. Revolutions have been fueled by a few powerful lines, and entire populations have been swayed by the charisma of someone who knew exactly what to say to stir emotions. And when a figure with global influence opens their mouth, the ripple effect is immediate and unstoppable. When a leader speaks, they're not just talking to their own supporters or their own country. They're speaking to the world. Every sentence becomes a headline, every soundbite becomes a talking point, and every slip or intentional jab can shift the tone of an entire global conversation. That's the power of words. They're not just vibrations in the air. They're catalysts. They plant seeds in people's minds, and those seeds, given the right conditions, can grow into belief systems, movements, even chaos. The reason this matters so much right now is because we are living in an era where words are no longer slow burning. They're instantaneous. The moment a leader says something controversial, it's clipped, posted, shared, and dissected within seconds. Billions of people can hear and respond before the day is over. And the danger is that the more power a person holds, the more dangerous their words can become, especially if those words tap into the emotional and spiritual vulnerabilities of a world already on edge. Recently, we've seen how easily a few sentences can polarize an entire population. The right phrase can make one group feel empowered and righteous while making another feel attacked and desperate. That's how division grows, not necessarily through actions first, but through rhetoric. And when that rhetoric carries undertones of power, dominance, and a subtle rewriting of moral boundaries, you have to pay attention, because history has taught us something chilling. Before major shifts in society, before oppression, before war, before mass deception, there's almost always a speech, a declaration, a rallying cry that makes the unacceptable sound reasonable. What we heard recently from Trump wasn't just a political statement, it was a psychological tool. And that's why this is important, because when certain phrases are repeated over and over, they begin to bypass our critical thinking and lodge themselves deep into our subconscious. It's not about whether you agree or disagree with the person. It's about recognizing that words have the ability to set the stage for a much larger agenda. And here's the part people often miss. The most dangerous words are not the ones shouted in anger. They're the ones spoken calmly, confidently, even persuasively when the audience's guard is down. That's when people nod without realizing they're agreeing to something that will lead them down a path they didn't intend to walk. That's when people begin to rally behind ideas they would have once rejected. Think about how carefully a chess master moves their pieces. Every move looks small on its own, but each one is part of a larger calculated plan. Words work the same way. The wrong statement in the right moment can advance an agenda in ways the public won't even see until it's too late. Right now, the world is hungry for answers, for stability, for someone to stand up and say, I will fix it all. And when you combine that hunger with a leader who knows how to craft their words to stir hope and fear at the same time, you create the perfect conditions for manipulation. This is how masses can be prepared, not through force first, but through language. Because before you can control people's actions, you must first control their thoughts. And once you understand that, you'll realize this isn't just politics, it's preparation. Preparation for something bigger, something that goes beyond government, beyond elections, beyond nations. And if we're not listening closely, if we're not filtering every word we hear through wisdom and discernment, we might just find ourselves applauding the very thing that will one day enslave us. The most dangerous weapon in the world is not the sword or the gun, it's the tongue. When you first hear a statement from a political leader, it's easy to dismiss it as just another opinion, another soundbite in the never-ending cycle of news. But sometimes if you pause and listen, really listen, you realize it's not just words, it's a signal. And when that signal lines up with patterns we've seen before, patterns that stretch back through history and into prophecy, you start to feel that unsettling truth. This might not be an accident. This might be intentional. The statement we heard recently from Trump wasn't just random. It had a tone, a weight, and a timing that seemed to fit into a much bigger picture. It wasn't simply about policy or politics. It was the kind of phrase that, if you know what to look for, feels like a breadcrumb leading to something greater. You see, prophecy doesn't unfold in giant leaps all at once. It moves step by step, and often those steps come in the form of words that prepare the mind before the action takes place. If you've studied the rise of dangerous leaders throughout history, you'll notice a familiar rhythm. It starts with speeches that shift the way people think. Not all at once, but slowly, subtly introducing ideas that sound appealing on the surface. Promises of unity, security, strength, a vision of a future that seems better, but requires people to make small compromises along the way. And then over time, those small compromises add up until people find themselves in a place they never thought they'd be, fully embracing a system that strips away their freedom, their morality, and their ability to question. When I heard this statement, I couldn't shake the thought that it carried this exact rhythm. It had the tone of reassurance, but hidden underneath was a framework that could easily become the foundation for something much more controlling. This is where the danger lies, not in obvious tyranny, but in the slow seduction of the masses by words that feel comforting. That's how the door is open, not kicked down. And if you connect this to the prophetic warnings we've been told for centuries, it's almost eerie how closely it aligns. The Bible speaks of a time when a leader will arise, speaking great and persuasive things, drawing people from every nation to follow him. Not through violence at first, but through a message so compelling, so convincing, that people will see him not as a threat, but as a savior. This is what makes the statement so concerning. It was designed to inspire loyalty, to paint a vision of order in a chaotic world, and to position the speaker as the one who can make it happen. The world right now is starving for leadership. People are desperate for someone to stand up and give them hope. But desperation is dangerous because it makes people vulnerable to the wrong hope, the wrong leader, the wrong vision. That's how prophecy gets fulfilled, not because people see the danger and run from it, but because they're too wary to notice they're walking straight into it. You have to understand the enemy doesn't present himself with horns and fire. Deception comes wrapped in light, in charm, in promises that sound like blessings. And when you hear certain leaders speak with such confidence and certainty about shaping the future, you have to ask yourself, whose future are they really shaping, and at what cost? This is why we can't just shrug off statements like this as just politics. Because in the wrong hands, political influence becomes spiritual influence. And once people's faith is transferred from God to a man, from truth to an ideology, they're already halfway down the path that prophecy warns us about. This is how the groundwork is laid for a figure who will rise and unite the world under one system, one rule, one authority, the very system the Antichrist will inherit. The statement we just heard may seem like a small thing now, but history has taught us that small things are often the sparks that light the biggest fires. And when those sparks match the warnings we've been given for generations, it's not paranoia to pay attention. It's wisdom. The most dangerous deception is the one that looks like the truth. Look around and you can feel it. The air is thick with tension. People are on edge, not just in one country, but everywhere. Political systems are crumbling under the weight of corruption and division. Economies are unstable. Inflation is eating away at people's savings, and everyday families are struggling just to survive. Natural disasters, wars, and constant uncertainty have left the world in a permanent state of anxiety. And when the ground beneath people's feet feels this shaky, they'll cling to anything that promises stability, even if it's not real. This is exactly the kind of environment that allows dangerous leaders to rise. Because fear has a way of lowering our guard. It makes us desperate for solutions, for someone to step in and promise order in the middle of the chaos. History shows us that the most charismatic and manipulative figures always step forward during moments like this. They know exactly what to say and when to say it, and they know how to use the fear of the people as the very foundation for their power. Right now, nations are not just divided politically, they're divided morally and spiritually. People don't just disagree anymore, they despise each other. The language has shifted from debate to destruction. Every side sees the other as a threat, and when that mindset takes hold, people start looking for a savior who can unite them, even if it means giving up freedoms to achieve that unity. This is one of the most dangerous psychological traps humanity falls into because unity without truth always leads to control. We are seeing an emotional climate that's primed for manipulation. The anger, the hopelessness, the fear, these aren't just emotions, they're tools. And the right leader knows how to turn them into weapons. When people feel helpless about the future, they're more likely to accept extreme measures today. When people are angry, they're easier to direct toward an enemy real or imagined. When people are afraid, they'll trade liberty for the illusion of safety without a second thought. It's in moments like this that words become even more powerful than laws. A speech can ignite violence or inspire obedience overnight. And when a leader with global reach starts speaking in a way that taps directly into that fear and division, the effect is immediate. People don't stop to analyze the deeper meaning. They just react. And in their reaction, they give more and more ground to the one holding the microphone. The frightening truth is that this climate doesn't just make people more likely to follow a strong leader, it makes them crave one. It makes them blind to the warning signs they would normally see. When the ship is sinking, nobody questions who's steering. They just want to believe someone can get them to shore. And that's exactly how the stage is set for someone to come in with a message that sounds like hope, but is actually the first step toward control. Think about how this connects to prophecy. We've been warned about a time when the world will be united under one system, one authority. That's not something that can happen in a peaceful, stable world. No. First, the old systems have to be broken. People have to lose faith in their governments, their institutions, their leaders, even in one another. And when that faith is gone, they'll be ready to put all their trust in the one person who seems to have the answers. That's exactly what we're seeing right now. Every crisis, every conflict, every disaster is pushing the world closer to that point. We are living in a time when global fear is the currency of influence. Whoever can calm that fear, or at least appear to, will hold the power. And once the people hand over their trust, getting it back will be almost impossible. This is why we cannot afford to be lulled into believing that the right leader will solve everything. Because the wrong leader can also look like the right leader when the world is desperate enough. And when the world is desperate enough, it will embrace its own destruction. One of the most dangerous patterns in human history is our tendency to elevate certain leaders to almost God, like status. We don't just support them, we worship them. We hang on their every word, defend them no matter what they do, and excuse behavior we would never tolerate from anyone else. It doesn't happen overnight. It builds slowly through charm, charisma, and the ability to make people feel seen and understood. But once it takes hold, it's powerful enough to blind entire nations. This is what makes influence such a dangerous weapon in the wrong hands. A charismatic leader doesn't just speak to people's minds, they speak to their hearts. They make you believe they're the only one who can fix what's broken. They position themselves as the answer to your fears, the solution to your problems, the protector of your future. And once people believe that, they'll follow wherever they're led, even if that path leads to destruction. Idolatry isn't just about statues and altars. It's about replacing the truth with a person, putting your hope in them instead of in God. It's about believing that one human being can do for you what only divine power can. And when people start looking to a leader as their ultimate source of hope, they've already taken the first step into deception. Because here's the truth, no man is perfect, no leader is above temptation, and no human being can handle that kind of worship without it corrupting them. Right now, we're seeing a world primed for that kind of misplaced loyalty. People are exhausted by instability. They're tired of being lied to, cheated, and manipulated by leaders who promise one thing and deliver another. That's when a certain kind of figure steps into the spotlight, someone who speaks with confidence, who makes bold promises, who tells people exactly what they want to hear. They present themselves as different from all the rest, as someone who will fight for the people, and in doing so, they create a bond that feels unbreakable. But that bond can be deadly because it often comes with a dangerous trade, off loyalty over truth. Once someone has won your heart, it becomes harder to see their flaws. You start defending them instead of holding them accountable. You start justifying their wrong decisions because you're convinced their overall vision is good. And before you know it, you're accepting things you would have once rejected without hesitation. This is how mass deception works. It doesn't demand that you change everything you believe at once. It just asks you to make small compromises in the name of loyalty. And with each compromise, the leader's control grows stronger while your ability to question grows weaker. By the time you realize how far you've drifted, you're already too invested to turn back without feeling like you've betrayed yourself. Prophecy warns us about a figure who will rise and command this kind of loyalty on a global scale, someone who will unite people not through truth, but through charisma, someone who will perform acts that seem miraculous, say things that sound wise, and offer solutions that feel irresistible. And the danger isn't that people won't recognize him, it's that they will recognize him and still choose to follow because they've already placed him on a pedestal in their hearts. That's why influence is so much more dangerous than force. Force can be resisted. Influence works from the inside out. It shapes the way you think, feel, and respond without you even realizing it. It changes your standards, your values, and your understanding of what's right and wrong. And when influence becomes idolatry, it doesn't just blind you to the truth, it makes you actively resist the truth when it's presented to you. The enemy doesn't need to drag people into deception, kicking, and screaming. All he has to do is give them someone they love enough to follow without question. And that is how a world prepares to welcome the wrong king. When you start connecting the dots between politics, global events, and prophecy, you begin to see a pattern that's impossible to ignore. The pieces are scattered at first, economic instability here, a political crisis there, moral decay spreading quietly in the background. On their own, these events might seem unrelated, just the natural chaos of a broken world. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, you start to realize they're all moving in the same direction, like rivers flowing toward the same ocean. The truth is, the political stage is not separate from the prophetic stage. They are intertwined. World leaders make decisions for power, for influence, for survival, but those decisions often fall right in line with the timeline that's been described for thousands of years. And when a figure like Trump makes certain statements that seem political on the surface, those words can resonate far deeper, echoing in the chambers of prophecy, whether he realizes it or not. Prophecy has always warned of a time when the world would become desperate enough to surrender its freedoms in exchange for stability. And right now, we're watching that desperation grow. Economic systems are strained to their breaking point. Cultures are tearing themselves apart from the inside. And the balance of power between nations is shifting faster than most people can keep up with. These aren't random occurrences. They're aligning with the exact conditions that would make it possible for a single global authority to rise and be welcomed. What makes this moment so crucial is that many people aren't connecting these events. They see inflation, but don't see how it fuels unrest. They see unrest, but don't connect it to the rise of authoritarian promises. They hear leaders speaking about unity, but don't question the cost of that unity. This is why connecting the dots is so important, because without that perspective, it's easy to believe that every crisis is isolated, when in reality, they are stepping stones toward a much larger and more dangerous reality. The moral decline we're seeing isn't just about changing values. It's about eroding the very foundation of truth. When truth becomes relative, when morality becomes flexible, when good and evil become a matter of opinion, society becomes ripe for manipulation. All it takes is one voice strong enough, confident enough to step in and redefine those terms, and the world will follow. We're seeing that power play out in real time as political rhetoric starts to sound more like a moral compass than actual truth. And here's the unsettling part. It doesn't matter if a leader is intentionally fulfilling prophecy or not. What matters is that the conditions prophecy warned us about are unfolding exactly as described. Whether by design or by the natural course of human ambition, the end result is the same, a world being shaped into something that will one day be handed over to a single ruler with unprecedented control. Right now, there's a convergence happening. Politics, economics, technology, and culture are all intersecting in ways that are making global unification more possible than ever before. Digital currencies, surveillance systems, and worldwide communication platforms are all tools that could, in the wrong hands, create a level of control humanity has never experienced. Add to that the emotional and spiritual condition of the world, and you have the exact recipe for what prophecy describes as the reign of the Antichrist. This is why every speech, every policy, every sudden shift in global power matters, because each one is either moving us closer to or further from that prophetic reality. And right now, it's hard to deny that most of the movement seems to be pushing us closer. The statements being made by leaders today are not just political, they're ideological. They are shaping the way the masses think, preparing them to accept changes that a decade ago they would have resisted without hesitation. The frightening truth is that the path to the fulfillment of prophecy doesn't need to be built overnight. It only needs to be built piece by piece, word by word, until the foundation is strong enough for the final figure to take his place. And the stage, my friends, is almost ready. In a world where headlines change by the minute and information travels faster than we can process it, discernment has become more valuable than ever. Yet it's also become more rare. We've been conditioned to react before we reflect, to accept before we examine, to follow before we question. And that is exactly the kind of mindset that allows deception to flourish. If we want to stand firm in the days ahead, we have to rise above that conditioning and train ourselves to see beyond the surface of what we're told. Awareness isn't just about knowing what's happening. It's about understanding what it means. It's the difference between seeing a puzzle piece and knowing where it fits in the bigger picture. Anyone can scroll through the news and see political statements, world events, or social changes. But not everyone stops long enough to ask, why now? Who benefits from this? What does this lead to if it continues? Those questions are the shield that protects you from being swept away by the momentum of the crowd. Discernment works the same way. It's not about being skeptical of everything for the sake of doubt. It's about filtering every word, every promise, every policy through the lens of truth. And truth isn't based on popularity, emotion, or political loyalty. It's grounded in unchanging principles. When you start using that kind of filter, you'll find that a lot of what sounds good at first doesn't hold up under the weight of reality. The danger today is that people have traded discernment for convenience. They let their favorite personalities Media outlets or political figures do the thinking for them. It's easier to adopt someone else's opinion than to wrestle with the facts yourself. But when you give up that responsibility, you also give up your ability to recognize when you're being led astray. And history is filled with examples of entire populations that surrendered their discernment to someone they trusted, only to realize too late that trust had been misplaced. Right now, there's an emotional pull happening on a global scale. Leaders know how to tap into fear, hope, anger, and pride to rally people to their cause. They're not just selling policies, they're selling identities. They're telling people, if you follow me, you're one of the good ones. If you stand against me, you're the problem. That kind of language shuts down critical thinking because it makes people afraid to question. Nobody wants to be labeled as the enemy, so they stay quiet, go along, and convince themselves it's for the greater good. But if we lose the ability to question, we've already lost the fight for truth. Silence in the face of deception isn't neutrality, it's consent. And the longer we stay silent, the more room we give for lies to take root till they become the accepted reality. By then, it doesn't matter whether we see the truth, because the system built on lies has already gained enough strength to keep us in place. This is why preparation isn't just physical, it's mental and spiritual. We can stockpile resources, plan escape routes, and guard our homes. But if our minds are unguarded, we will still fall into the same traps as everyone else. Awareness keeps your eyes open. Discernment keeps your heart steady, and both keep you from being swayed by the smooth words of someone whose real goal is control. We can't afford to be passive listeners anymore. We have to weigh every message against what we know to be true, even if it costs us friendships, comfort, or social approval. Because when the pressure comes, and it will, it won't be enough to say, I didn't know. The question will be, why didn't you want to know? The coming deception will not look like deception. It will look like the answer to every problem. It will look like peace, safety, and unity. And unless you've trained yourself to look deeper, you'll miss the signs until it's too late. The time to sharpen your awareness and strengthen your discernment is now, because when the wrong king steps onto the stage, the applause will be deafening. When you put all of this together, the power of words, the prophetic weight behind certain statements, the climate of fear and division, the danger of misplaced loyalty, the undeniable connections between politics and prophecy, and the urgent need for awareness, you see the same truth staring back at you. The world is being prepared, not by accident, not by coincidence, but by a series of events and influences that are shaping hearts, minds, and nations to accept a leader who will not come in the name of truth. This isn't about one man or one political party. It's about a global shift, a spiritual battle that's been unfolding since the beginning of time. The deception that's coming will not feel like darkness. It will feel like light. It will not sound like tyranny. It will sound like hope. And that's why it will be so effective. People will embrace it willingly, thinking they found salvation when in reality they've walked straight into captivity. But here's the good news. You don't have to be deceived. You don't have to be swept along with the crowd. You can choose to see clearly, to question deeply, to anchor yourself in truth that doesn't change with the tides of public opinion. And if enough of us make that choice, the darkness will not have the final word. Because in the end, it's not the noise of deception that determines the future. It's the quiet strength of those who refuse to believe it.